you!
Yeah. Well, yes, kind of.
How could you, man? How could you?
Fine. I'll talk about War of the Worlds. Now, before I even get into anything revolving any criticism regarding this huge piece of shit, I want to address something. One of the first videos I ever made for this channel was a video titled The Worst Film of 2023, and it was me discussing why I felt Dexter Fletcher's Ghosted was one of the worst things I'd ever seen. And although I am extremely proud of that video and I love everything about it really, it's flawed in places where I was still learning how to make these videos, but it's still kind of like a rose-tinted approach to viewing it nowadays. I had one rule when making that and when making future videos was I didn't want this channel to become this cynical project that I was doing on the sidelines. I didn't want every single video I was making to be me constantly pushing down on films and talking about how they're awful and how this one's bad or whatever. I wanted this to be a place where I could just discuss films in general and talk about how much I love the process of them being made and also the process of viewing them as pieces of art. So therefore I kind of toned back the amount of videos I was doing criticizing how bad films were. There's been a handful of these ones that I did make. I try and tone it back a little bit. That being said, War of the Worlds is a very special piece of shit movie. One that honestly doesn't come around all that often. It's once in a blue moon you get something that's so insanely awful in every aspect of the word and beyond, honestly. I'm not saying that any film I've made is a masterpiece. They're not. They're incredibly flawed. But in comparison to War of the Worlds, they might win an Oscar. Now, before we get into things properly of why this is so awful, let's have a little bit of background. Now, of course, War of the Worlds is the 2025 film that has taken the internet by storm the past couple of weeks. It's an adaptation of H.G. Wells' 1898 novel, The War of the Worlds, and of course, there's been a wide array of adaptations that have come out. The Spielberg one, there was obviously the Orson Welles radio show, that was like kind of the thing that put it on the map. And of course, the novel is very influential in that fact. That's why they adapted it so many times. And the Orson Welles radio show is just as iconic. There is a Simpsons Treehouse of Horror segment about it, actually, which reminds me that I still need to finish that fucking video. And although the film was only released at the end of July, very slyly on Amazon Prime, this is a project that went into production and honestly has been finished for 5 years. If you're wondering why it took them so long to release it, you obviously haven't watched it. It has a pretty interesting cast with people like Devin Brostick, who you'll recognise from Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
That's not me.
That's not you?
Nope.
And other people like Clark Gregg, and of course, who could forget the one and only Ice Cube.
It's you!
Now, the film follows a pretty normal structure. This man works for the FBI, and who would have fucking thought it? Aliens are invading the planet, and everything basically just goes tits up. We learn that Ice Cube's character is a very flawed man. He's very disconnected from his family due to the passing of his wife, and his kids kind of like, not resent him, but they're not close in any way. A few other things to know about the production is it only lasted 15 days, obviously a very quick production, but you have to keep in mind everything in this movie is recorded on a fucking computer screen, so of course it didn't take that long to make this. But interestingly enough, post-production lasted for a whole 2 years. Why? Really? Like, seriously, what took 2 years to put this fucking movie together? But then that also doesn't really add up because it means they finished it in 2022 and then they only released it a couple weeks ago. So finally we get to the part where I get to talk about why this is just such an awful thing and some of the issues with the fact that this has become such a mass watched film due to word of mouth about how awful it is, myself being just as bad. First of all, they're trying to replicate this thing that's been done in other films where the whole movie takes place on a computer screen. There's obviously stuff out there like Unfriended, Searching, I think the other one's called Missing. Although those movies aren't all great, I think Searching is probably the best example of this. A really riveting thriller that keeps the concept interesting and does it right. That's the big issue that a lot of these films have, is that they don't completely commit themselves to the gimmick of having everything on the screen. They don't make everything completely accurate. They have like an alternative for Google or YouTube and all of that stuff. It just comes off as corny and it's not interesting. And someone who's as chronically online as I am will point out that's bullshit. War of the Worlds is the worst example of this. All of the computer screens are in this top quality. Of course, if you're going to do something like a webcam, it's going to have that little blurry motion. You probably notice it with my camera. So why they couldn't just downgrade that a bit, obviously they want to make it look good for audiences, but like, if you're committing to the accurate part of this, why not go all the way? Not to mention that the story is just a fucking clusterfuck of ideas that don't work, and it becomes more laughably bad than anything. Like, this movie I would recommend because it is so funny. And realistically, that's probably the only reason that Amazon decided to put this out in the end, is because they knew it was kind of laughably bad. But I'll speak more on that later on. So we've already discussed it looks awful and the story sucks. What about the acting?
It's you!
It's bad. Ice Cube does not give a singular fuck about what he's doing. His reactions to like people being murdered is nothing more than him just looking at the screen like... And that's kind of the worst and best part about this, is just how hilarious it comes off with his performance. I don't know if he was aware of the fact that he just wasn't trying, or maybe this was a good paycheck for him and he just thought, fuck it, I'm gonna do the bare minimum. There's CGI aliens too. They look bad. I mean, is there seriously a single thing I can praise this film on apart from the fact that laughably quite silly and stupid and awful? But then I can't really praise it for that because maybe they didn't have the intention of doing that in the first place. Obviously, with this being a streaming film, we don't really have all that much statistics behind the making of it and stuff like that. We just have a few things here and there. Apparently this cost $65 million. Now, this could be complete horseshit, and it's not like they marketed this at all. I don't have to double that or anything. I'm taking this information with a huge grain of salt, but still, if that is true, where did that money go? Where did it go? It's not even like they had to pay Amazon for product placement. It's an Amazon movie! Basically, the only reason this happened was because of a pandemic, and Universal Pictures and Prime thought that they could make a cheap buck off of this. And, I mean, it kind of worked. The only thing is, I don't understand why, if they were making this for the pandemic, why they wouldn't rush it as much as possible to get it out for then. This should have been a film that we were laughing at like 5 years ago and moving on from. But maybe it's like the ironicness of us being out of this pandemic for what, like 3 years now? All of this stuff feels outdated and null and void of any real emotion or relevancy to what the current climate of the world is. Which then leads me on to maybe my biggest issue with this film, which is how we as a viewer view it. And I'm including myself as much part of the problem of this. The film got awful reviews everywhere. People on Twitter were laughing at it. People online were just harassing the shit out of it. And the Rotten Tomatoes score, which many people claim is the holy grail of how to judge a movie on if it's good or bad, was very low. The issue was, as word spread and people continued to talk about how awful it was, oh, you have to see this film, it's like nothing you'll ever see before. Well, then that leads to more people checking it out, and the streaming numbers going up. And at one point in time when I actually watched it, it was #1 most popular thing on Prime. Which leads me to believe that the people that released this realised how awful it was and kind of hoped that it would clock on to that meme marketing. That things like the Barbenheimer trend took on, or Madame Web, or Morbius. Although Morbius is kind of the funny one, because that movie made no money, and then they gaslit Sony into releasing it back in cinemas. And guess what? No one went to go and see it when it was re-released. Whereas War of the Worlds having the convenience of being able to be watched at your home, it just means that everyone's going to watch it. You know, this is kind of like a non-issue, but then it also kind of is. Because then studios might look at this and think, oh, people kind of love these movies that are so bad they're funny, so maybe we'll clock on and make more of these. Maybe this is a whole conspiracy that's never really been tapped up on. Maybe they knew that Madame Web was awful and unviewable, or Unfrosted. Actually, Unfrosted doesn't really count, no one saw that. But maybe they're aware that these movies are so bad that they're funny, and they release them in the hopes that they become these trending topics, and in a way they make their profit back. Maybe I sound like a tinfoil hat person right now. I guess the biggest way to stop trash like this coming out is to just not watch it, but also, maybe I do want more things like this. Would I watch War of the Worlds again? Yes. No. That's the issue, is I don't know. At the end of the day, War of the Worlds is an embarrassingly awful film that premiered on one of the worst streaming services by one of the most evil companies in the world. That reminds me of one thing I didn't mention was the product placement. This thing's so predominant. I mean, the villain is kind of defeated by an Amazon warehouse delivery driver. You know, It doesn't get more dystopian than that. At the end of the day, I really do think I would recommend people that haven't seen this check this out. Just out of the sheer interest of seeing that something so impressively awful can exist out there.
It's you!
Thank you so much for watching this video. I try so hard not to be uploading so many cynical videos punching down on filmmakers, but this really like takes the cake for I don't see anything being worse than this for the rest of the year, so there is that. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought about War of the Worlds. Is it really a laughably bad movie, or is it just flat out like an awful picture? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's you! It's you!
Yeah.